What if a small act of kindness you did today returned to you years later in the most surprising and life-changing way? Stay with me until the very end of this story, because what begins with a nurse buying a simple meal for a poor patient ends with a shocking twist that you will never forget. And dear viewers, if you believe that kindness still matters in this world, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel, so you never miss more heart-touching stories like this one. Emma was a young nurse working at St. Mary's Hospital, a place where the walls often echoed with both hope and despair, laughter and pain. She had always chosen nursing not for the money or recognition, but because she felt deeply for people who were suffering. Every morning, as she tied her hair neatly and slipped into her crisp white uniform, she whispered a small prayer, "Let me be a reason someone feels cared for today." It was on one such day that Emma met Henry, a frail middle-aged man who had been admitted into the hospital late at night. He had collapsed on the street, and when paramedics brought him in, he carried no wallet, no ID, no family waiting by his side. All he had were tired eyes, worn-out clothes, and a quiet sense of shame that clung to him like a shadow. Emma noticed him the next morning when she was doing her usual rounds. He looked pale, his lips dry, his hands trembling slightly as he lay in bed. She gently checked his forehead, smiled warmly, and asked, "Good morning, sir. How are you feeling today?" His eyes darted away, embarrassed. "Hungry," he whispered faintly, almost ashamed to admit it. Emma frowned slightly. Hospital meals were served, but patients needed to request them, and Henry hadn't. When she checked his records, she realized why. He had no insurance, no listed contacts, nothing to cover even the basic charges. The hospital staff treated him, of course, but the system was strict: no extras, no luxuries, just the bare minimum. That meant even a proper meal was considered extra. Emma's heart ached. She thought of how dignity often meant little things, like eating without begging. So, during her short lunch break, she quietly walked down to the cafeteria, bought a warm tray of food with her own money, and carried it up to Henry's room. She placed it in front of him and said softly, "You don't need to worry. Just eat." Henry stared at the meal as if it were a miracle. A steaming bowl of soup, a small piece of bread, some fruit, simple, ordinary things, yet to him, it looked like a feast. His hands trembled as he picked up the spoon. Why are you doing this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Emma sat at the edge of his bed and said gently, "Because sometimes we all need a little help. And I believe no one should ever suffer hunger while healing." Henry's eyes filled with tears. He took a slow bite, then another, and for a few moments, silence filled the room except for the sound of him eating. Emma didn't press him for details of his life. She could tell by his guarded expression that he had seen hardships he wasn't ready to share. She simply stayed, her presence like a quiet reassurance. From that day forward, she continued checking on him more often than her schedule demanded. When she saw his food tray empty too quickly, she would sneak in an apple or a sandwich from her own bag. Sometimes, she would bring tea and sit with him while he drank it. Henry began opening up little by little. He told her he had once worked at construction sites, that he had a family once but lost everything in a spiral of bad luck, illness, and betrayal. His voice was filled with shame when he spoke of sleeping on benches, wandering streets with no destination. "I don't deserve kindness," he muttered one evening. Emma shook her head firmly. "Everyone deserves kindness. Life can break us in ways we never imagined, but kindness helps us heal." Her words struck him like a light piercing the darkness. Days turned into weeks, and soon Henry grew stronger. The hospital eventually discharged him after stabilizing his condition. On his last day, he stood at the door, his thin body clothed in donated clothes, holding a small paper bag with medicines. He looked at Emma, who was finishing paperwork. "I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. She smiled warmly and replied, "Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. And if life ever gives you a chance to be kind to someone else, pass it on." Henry's lips trembled as if he wanted to say more, but words failed him. Instead, he gave her one long look, filled with gratitude, and left. Emma didn't expect to see him again. In truth, she thought he might disappear into the vast, uncaring world, just another soul swallowed by the hardships of life. But she never forgot him. At times, when she was exhausted from long shifts or felt disheartened by the bureaucracy of healthcare, she thought of Henry's eyes when he ate that first meal, and she reminded herself why she chose this path, to give people dignity when the world stripped it away. Years passed. Emma's life moved on, though it was never easy. She became head nurse eventually, respected by her colleagues and loved by her patients. Still, her own life was modest. She lived in a small rented apartment, often skipping luxuries so she could send money to her aging parents. She had no husband or children. Her work was her life. Some nights she felt lonely, but she had made peace with it, telling herself that her purpose was to heal others. One rainy evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Emma was called to the hospital's reception. The clerk looked puzzled and said, "There's someone asking for you. He says it's urgent." Emma walked down the hallway, her shoes clicking softly against the polished floor, and found a tall, well-dressed man waiting. He wore an expensive suit, his hair neatly styled, his presence commanding. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then he smiled, and her breath caught. It was Henry. Older, healthier, transformed beyond recognition. "Emma," he said softly, his voice steady and strong now. "Do you remember me?" Emma blinked, astonished. "Henry? Is it really you?" He nodded, his eyes shining. "Yes. You once bought me a meal when I couldn't even afford food. You gave me hope when I thought my life was over. And today, I've come back because I promised myself that if life ever gave me the chance, I would return to repay that kindness." Emma shook her head quickly, smiling. "You don't need to repay me, Henry. I did what anyone with a heart would do." But Henry raised his hand gently, stopping her. "No, Emma. You don't understand. That moment changed my life. After I left this hospital, I struggled, yes. But your words, your kindness, they stayed with me. I worked hard, took odd jobs, slowly rebuilt myself. Eventually, I got an opportunity in real estate. I worked day and night, and over the years, I became successful. Very successful. And I kept remembering you, the nurse who gave me dignity when I had nothing. So now, I've come back with a surprise." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to her, his eyes full of anticipation. Emma opened it cautiously and gasped. It was a legal document, papers declaring ownership of a beautiful house, fully paid and transferred in her name. "Henry, I can't, this is too much," she whispered, trembling. Tears welled in her eyes. Henry shook his head firmly. "No. It's not enough. You gave me a meal, but more than that, you gave me back my faith in humanity. You believed I was worth something when even I didn't. This house is not just a gift. It's my way of saying thank you, my way of keeping the chain of kindness alive." Emma's hands shook as she held the papers. She was overwhelmed, years of sacrifice, living modestly, never owning anything of her own, and now this. She looked at Henry, her voice choked. "I never expected anything back. Kindness is not an investment, it's a gift we give freely." Henry smiled softly. And sometimes, life finds a way to return it in the most unexpected ways. At that moment, Emma realized the depth of what had happened. Her simple act of compassion, something she had almost forgotten, had set in motion a chain of events that led to this day. She accepted the gift, but more than that, she accepted the message. It wasn't about the house, but about the power of one small act of kindness to change a life. That night, as Emma walked through the doors of her new home, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. She knew the house was more than walls and a roof. It was proof that kindness never disappears, it circles back, often when least expected. And she promised herself that just as Henry had done, she too would keep the chain alive, by helping others, by reminding them that no matter how dark life feels, kindness can light the way. Clapperboard. Dear viewers, wasn't that incredible? A single meal changed a man's entire destiny, and years later, it came back as a life-changing surprise for the nurse who never expected anything in return. This story reminds us that kindness is never wasted, it always finds its way back. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real, emotional stories of kindness that inspire us all.